another episode of the Next Fix podcast. This is Jeanne, and for all of you people in the United States as ignorant as me, it is not Jeanne, it is Jeanne. So, said it wrong once, she corrected me. Thank God, right? Because now I'm not going to get it wrong again. And so she has blessed us with her time, and we're going to dive into her story. But before that, I want to ask you how you are, Jeanne. How are you living? How's things on your end?
Things, they're amazing, actually, naturally high. That's what I'm all about, is like how we find a life that's worth living after the drugs and alcohol being put down.
Okay.
It's going to go back, right? Like that's where it's going to take us.
Right. And so that synthetic numbing, coping, or, getting through the day.
It's or pattern or paradigm, right?
Sure. And so and as we were kind of lightly touching on before we hit record, there's typically a genesis for anybody in the space, which you are most currently working on innovations for people like yourself and myself, people in recovery. And so that is something to be grateful for. I'm very thankful for your work, and we're going to dig into exactly what that looks like. But we want to know first, when did the train come off the tracks for you? What was your experience that spawned you desiring to help out with something like substance abuse and alcohol and drugs and all this stuff that we have put down?
Absolutely. So thank you very much for having me. Firstly, Ryan, it's always a pleasure to lend my voice in any way that can be helpful. So recovery chose me. I didn't choose it. You may have heard that before, but literally my first brush with adversity was at the age of 4. And that was when I was a middle child and my baby sister had died. And it sent our household into chaos. And I also grew up with an older brother who was 6 years older than me and 6 feet tall. So he's quite substantially bigger than me. And he sexually abused me. And he was also a heroin addict. So I had a front row seat to crazy from a very, very young age. My parents were middle-class people just doing the best they could, raised in UK, London, England. And in the early 60s, it was really about children should be seen and not heard. You don't air your dirty laundry. And so I just suffered in silence. And so by the time I was 12, which was the beginning of my rebellious years, I found a way to feel better. And that's exactly what drugs and alcohol, well, I shouldn't say alcohol, but drugs did for me at that stage in my life.
Sure.
It became a coping mechanism for me, literally, until it didn't. And I was a chameleon most of my life. I sort of danced with danger, but I also was, I looked respectable, like I could balance it really well. And my life wasn't imploding. It was just imploding internally. So I was married with 3 young children when I first hit recovery in the early 90s at the age of 33. And I did everything that was prescribed to me. It was 12-step, it was treatment, it was aftercare meetings, it was recovery meetings, it was everything. And then at 7 years sober, I kind of had this spiritual awakening that if this is what recovery looks like, I don't want it, because I was frozen inside my body from unhealed trauma and unprocessed trauma. Nobody knew what trauma was then. They do now. It's trendy. But in the day, it was like, even though I was fully disclosing, nobody was caring. It was all about substances, the drugs and alcohol, drugs and alcohol, drugs and alcohol. I was filled with shame to start with. So I didn't need a reminder that there was something wrong with me. I already believed that wholeheartedly. I hated it. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. Like that's how bad shame permeated through my soul. And so at 7 years sober, I came to this crossroad and I thought to myself, I got to find a better solution, because if this is it, I don't want any part of it. I guess I was clinically depressed at the time.
Well, hold on, Jeanne. And I'm so sorry. That I'm trying to piece everything together here. And now at 33 is when you began recovery, right? That's when you had started?
Yeah.
So, but you started, you started with drugs at 12, right? And then you kind of jumped there, and you went to married with 3 kids and then 33. So all of that time, how did that look? I mean, what did that?
Always dancing with, like, it was always like, it was rebellious behavior. It was high risk behavior, impulsive behavior. And I was just lucky that I never ended up in jail or with a criminal record.
Right.
Further, I was just really lucky. and that my life didn't implode on the outside. But what for me it did was it imploded internally. Like I just wanted out. I was probably, yeah, I was suicidal. I just hated myself so much. I was in so much emotional pain. My family didn't know how to help me. Not that I was asking, but they were sort of consumed with my brother, who was, a criminal by this time and causing all sorts of, he held the family hostage, for want of a better word, emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And so they were doing the best they could. And I was just like kind of the good kid trying to keep out. One child had died, one child's imploding. And I felt like this huge responsibility to keep things together. But I was together on the outside, but internally I wasn't.
So I was a center stage addict and alcoholic, right? And I know that some people I care very much about, right? The fact that they weren't in the center stage, it was almost worse because they weren't bad enough to get all the attention to become better. So they just kind of limped along with their own substance abuse and their own troubles, but nobody paid much attention. So that's a tough place to be that you were in, right? Because I'm sure everybody's like, calling all cars, right? All hands on deck to take care of the brother who's, clearly a mess. But then did you feel ignored?
Yeah, I did, because my mom wasn't emotionally available. So she had a good reason, right? And my brother was like center stage. And for me, I really had this epiphany at a young age. Like, I got to go solo. I'm riding this solo. Like, no one's here. My dad was a great father, but out making money. My mom was the one who was responsible, but really not equipped. So I really learned that once I found friends. And my brother was kind of like, he's no longer alive and hasn't been for the last 30 odd years, but he he was also an enemy that I needed to keep close, because you want to keep enemies close. I was terrified of him, and I didn't know this until he had passed at the age of 36. He died in 80. So yeah, I'm just trying to think when he died. Yeah. So that's basically, and I went into recovery shortly after that. So, I didn't really understand what was going on. I was just like, I was tenacious and spirited and self-reliant and good at just juggling and being a chameleon. I was good at survival. I was adaptive, really. That's what I was doing.
Right, right. That's still, and for you to be so aware, I mean, now clearly you've done a ton of work, right? You've done a ton of introspection, and not just, for other people, but we haven't gotten to that part yet. However, you had mentioned something that a couple of times already, is that if this is recovery, you don't want any part of it. What are you exactly referencing as far as that statement?
A lot of dogma, a lot of shame, a lot of top-down authoritative approach, because I felt that authority had already failed me, right? Like, anybody who was supposed to be in that kind of authoritarian position, whether it was a treatment center or my family or whatever, nobody's listening, nobody's home, right? They haven't really, checked out. And there was a time when I did disclose at the age of 15 what had happened. And it's very typical behavior. Is like, just this epiphany came to me the other day, was they're asking me if I'm telling the truth, and he's a heroin addict. How? It's just like any classic person who gets raped. They're asking the victims, are they being honest, or they're questioning their reputation or you know what I'm saying? Like, why?
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
like on the wrong person, right? But that's just the way it is. So I already felt like I had been failed in that respect. But I think I held on to 12 step because I needed a solution so desperately. I really did. And it got me clean. I'll be honest. It got me clean. I don't think I would have had the discipline to stay the course had it not been that rigid. But what it did do was there was no room for any other healing, for whether it was for trauma healing, which soon came into be, but it wasn't recognized in the early 90s. Even smart recovery, I became a facilitator very early on. And like, they looked at me with two heads in my home group, like, why are you doing this? This is the solution, right? And that's when I realized, like, I'm a different thinker. Like, it's not that we're asking you to abort one thing. We're asking you to be inclusive of something else that could be possibly a solution for people, right? And that's when I really started to feel like I'm having trouble with this. Never deny I have a substance issue, but I really had a trauma issue, severe, adverse, complex trauma, which I lived for decades with.
Curiosity, what was your substance?
I started with pot, hallucinogenics. I settled into, like, what they called meth back in the day, speed, bennies, acid. Never drank alcohol into my face. It just didn't appeal
Wow.
to me. I was, I guess, a hardcore drug addict. Never used IV, thank God. But I just consume anything. I would say I'm a polysubstance user. Anything that would make me feel better.
Peculiar. I just, the alcohol coming into play so late.
Yeah, because I really knew that this was the solution for me. It delivered, right? So it just never appealed to me. Otherwise, it probably would have imploded much earlier. But yeah, I did what I needed to do.
So you did find some success with AA, right?
In terms of sobriety, but I don't think I had emotional sobriety, which is really what I was looking for. And which is where I am today, that we want a holistic, integrated emotional sobriety where you're redesigning your life in a way in every aspect, because it does touch, like trauma touched every aspect of my life. It prevented me from finishing my education. It prevented me from, it becomes a learning disability. It became everything in every aspect. So the solution had to be the same. It needed to be holistic in terms of mission, purpose, health, career, family, relationships. And it took a long time. There were things that I was able to grasp on. At 22, I got married. And my husband, it was 24. We're still married today, 44, almost 45 years later. It's been a bumpy ride. We
Congratulations.
both had to heal within our relationship, and our children have been impacted by it, but everybody's whole and doing well, thank God. But, so I'm really a testament of the work that I really wanted to do for myself. And my family was I call it your science experiment. We're all science experiments in our own right, just doing our best, figuring it out.
That whole time, what was it like for your husband? Like, did he partake in the same things that you did, or was it hidden from him?
I hit it. I hit it. Absolutely hit
Wow.
it. Yeah.
Wow.
And then he gave me an ultimatum. It was me and the children. It was me getting it together with the kids. And that was not negotiable for me at all. That was my bottom line. That was the thing that shocked me into reality. Wasn't
Wow.
lose it. That was the only thing that mattered to me at that stage.
Sure. So is that how that went down? Like you're cruising along, coping in secret with all of the most inappropriate ways, right? You're using all these things, and then it was like one day, it was like sat you down and said it's either us and the children, or
Yeah.
you.
I remember exactly where we were, downtown in Toronto, in Yorkville. And he just said to me, it was a series of blips that came about that he was aware more and more of what was going on. And he just says, I am not doing this anymore. You need to get it together.
Wow. Wow. And you did. What a magnificent result. And so
Be careful
where
what you wish for. You always say that, right? When you ask someone to change, you never know what you're getting, right? Be careful what you wish for.
right. I mean, it's easy for us to say now because now we're looking back, and of course it's easy to connect the dots. I'm sure that was not an easy conversation for either one of you.
Yeah.
But well, good on you though, because you managed to. Now that's where you started AA. Was it from that
We
conversation that
started
you're like,
treatment, but really the reason I say treatment, it was really drug and alcohol treatment, and they didn't touch on trauma. They didn't touch on depression, mental health, complex, anything. You know what I mean? Like none of it was OCD. None of that was discussed back in the day. It was if the alcohol and the drugs were the presenting issues, then that is the issue. We
sure,
know differently now, but that's what it was like back in the day.
right? And I'm not an AA guy. It wasn't my path. Ironically, my father, who's 12 years sober, I just spoke to him the first time in 5 years the other day, so it's very fresh on my
Oh,
mind. He's been sober in NA, right? Cocaine was his thing. And so we didn't have much of a relationship, but I shared with him that what the rooms wasn't for me. And it was, from a very simplistic observation on my end, I just didn't think it was future oriented enough for myself. I didn't want to bring up and hammer home my identity. It was very clear in my mind I was a mess. And so I wanted to get away from it. And so is it the most appropriate? Because I know I do have trauma. And I mentioned this to him. There is between him and I. And I just kind of that is like kind of my natural gear. So have I like dealt with it appropriately? I guess in many people's opinions, probably not. However, I'm sober. So I got that going for me.
say good, better, best, right? Like we're all like, listen, if something else was presented to me, I would have taken it. There's no question. because it re-stigmatized me.
Right.
It wasn't really, I think it's different for women than men. And I'm not going to get into gender neutral and all that stuff, but I really believe that in my circumstances, it being told I wasn't doing it correctly was
Mm.
absolutely detrimental to my well-being.
Right. And so that was your experience. They're like, here's the rules, follow the rules. If you don't, we're gonna get in your face. Because that's kind of how they kind of do it, right? Like they rough you up a bit, right? Like this is what you gotta do. What's wrong with
This
you,
is what you
dummy?
need. That's,
Like, and
your
so
own best thinking got you here. What do you know, right?
sure. And so it didn't work for me, and it helped you a little bit. It was maybe just a bit of a launch pad to get you some clarity, but then you realize rather quickly, like it wasn't sufficient. So what was this innovation? What did come from you realizing that it wasn't holistic and it wasn't enough for you and your circumstances?
I didn't realize how pervasive the trauma was at the time. I just knew what had happened to me. And I just thought that's just kind of my lot in life. And I'm to get on with it. I'm a get on with it kind of girl, right? Like, let's get the job done. I was proficient in some areas of my life and really not in others. So what I did was, at 7 years sober, I thought I was literally crawling out of my skin. When I say that, I was frozen in my body. Like, I couldn't turn or move properly, which I understand now what that means. I was depressed. I wasn't medicated, and I was sober. And that's when I said to myself, if this is what it's like, I don't want any part of this. And I was really, the only thing keeping me going was my children. So, but my life looked picture perfect. I had a house, a career, 3 young children, a husband who loved me, but I hate my life and I want to kill myself. So that's not what I called sobriety. So what I did was I dove into everything. I just had this quest, which I think it happens for a lot of us when we wake up and you've wasted a lot of time with substance abuse or addiction or whatever. And I had this quest to learn. And the first thing I found was Kundalini yoga, believe it or not. And, I wanted to be an addiction counselor. I wanted to learn. And when I found Kundalini, it was a really bizarre event. I ended up meeting Tommy Rosen and Mastin Kipp. I don't know if you know them, in one night.
Don't, and you might want to just for the sake of everybody and including myself, kind of touch on exactly what
So
those.
Tommy Rosen is the founder of Recovery 2.0, which he's all about yoga and recovery. And Mastin Kipp he's now a trauma expert, but at the time he was more he had a blog that went viral with one of the Kardashians. So I dragged my 19-year-old daughter. No, this was another time, but yeah, I found Kundalini yoga. And then so making reference to them, we went to a yoga class and I came out of there as high as a kite. Like, it was 6 hours later. So it wasn't like a traditional yoga class. It was all about breath work, and Kundalini is very potent. Anybody who understands what Kundalini yoga is knows it's extremely potent. And I went, oh my God, I feel naturally high. There, I knew there was a solution, that it was possible to feel different naturally. What my
Okay,
podcast is named after, Naturally High, because that's what I want to do. I still want to feel good
sure.
in a healthy way, obviously. So that was one thing. And then from there, it was going back to school, clinical addiction counseling. It was NLP. It was clinical hypnotherapy, compassion inquiry. It was somatic healing. It was working with a bunch of psychotherapists and doing process work. And it was like literally taking your clothes off naked. That's what it felt like to process your trauma in a room full of 20 people, right? We're like, these were the early adopters. And at the time I thought, yeah, I know I need this for myself, but am I really going to use this on my clients? Because this was 20 years ago. Nobody had caught up yet. Nobody had caught up yet. And now this is mainstream. Everything I'm talking about is more mainstream now. But back then, didn't really know what to do. And then, from there, I fell so that was sort of my salvation for a period of time. And then in my 40s, when I had a teenager, my middle son, he fell into major depression and generalized anxiety. And we spun around for 2.5 years. And then suddenly I said to myself, the school called me to pick him up. And I knew then we were in trouble if they're calling me. And looked at my son. I said to him, I said, what's okay? He says, I know I should be happy. He says, everything about my life is great. I have a great family. I go to a private school. Everything is great. He says, but I feel like I want to die. And it hit me in that moment. I'm going to get emotional. It hit me in that moment that nobody knows what this looks like. So I said, can I take you to the doctor? He says, yes. Take him to the doctor. The doctor says, go take him to the hospital. I take him to the hospital. After many hours, they discharge him to go to the following week. And I knew that there's something major wrong going on here. If this kid is admitting this and I don't know what to do, they don't know what to do. So as a series of calls or research led me to, which was again my research, led me to an underground pipe road that took us, that we're Canadian, that navigated our child to the US for treatment in Utah, into wilderness programs, and then into a therapeutic setting. And there was a real informal education for me. And I brought it back to Canada. Again, there was another door that opened for me by chance. I was looking for a place to volunteer, didn't have any agenda. And I ended up being chair of this national program across Canada which is sponsored by RBC, with a brilliant psychiatrist who, it could have been anybody, but it was me. And I just fell into the right place at the right time. And it was intoxicating for me. Like, I just loved learning everything about youth and adolescent mental health and addiction, and how to navigate for services and appropriate treatment matching and sequential treatment and everything. And I was very fortunate. We were published in the Canadian Mental Health Journal. It's a thriving program, still going. And then I thought, I'm going to open my own business, but I do not want to work with teenagers, because by now, my son is now in his 20s, who at the time, he's now mid-30s, thriving, married. All my children are married, thriving, all done work, except for my eldest, who's not done any work because he doesn't think he needs any work, but he's married and happy. And otherwise, the whole family's done.
Real quick, Jeanne, I want to know, how did it look like for him? He went down to Utah, and then they kind of started with like some wilderness kind of, exposure. And then, so what did treatment look like for him to come out of that depressive state? I guess, what ended up being his particular solution? I'm out of curiosity.
Yeah. So he did. So first of all, there was what they used to call educational consultants, and now therapeutic consultants or navigators or whatever. They did assessments. Nobody was doing a full-blown assessment, because typically people assessing crisis, which is not an accurate assessment. So they do assessments, where psychological assessments, which were bona fide, and that really revealed major depression for him, generalized anxiety, which is not just generalized anxiety, is actually the worst kind of anxiety you can have. It's your life is paralyzed by anxiety, as opposed to different things. And I look back now, my brother died just after my son was born, that child was born. So that probably impacted him in more ways. Maybe he was uniquely wired a certain way, differently than other kids, but I'm sure that had an impact on him. And so they came up with a treatment protocol, and they gave us choices of where they think he would fare best and what that was like. And we made an investment in him. We basically bought our kid's life. It's not something we could really afford at the time, but we made an investment in him. And I always joke with this child, and I say to him, I said, "You're the guy, if we had bet money on, we would have thought we had lost." He's like a perfect child now. I go, "You're the perfect child." He's 36. It's taken a while, but anyway.
Yeah, but hey, the timing isn't really up to us a lot of times, right? So like the timing, if it does ever come around, it's a blessing when it does. So that's very cool. Very, very, very cool.
Yeah.
And so the family unit doing well, right? All your children made it. And I feel like that.
Yeah.
I've got
a bumpy road. I'm not going to say, but here's the thing. I came from a family that didn't want to talk about anything. So once I realized that this is the path I'm walking, which was really not something I would have signed up for, trust me, if I had a way to move out of it, but they were too important to me. As I said in the beginning, that I chose this pathway. But, my family, and part of it was the era, the time, didn't want to talk about anything. So I was available to make sure that if we've got issues, we're going to do it differently. And so it's very hard not to overcompensate, because you can swing too far the other way, which
Right.
I'm aware of. But I think we found some equilibrium in the meantime, but it took some time. I wanted to be honest with my children. And I think what parents misunderstand or really don't see at the time is children grow up. They may be babies, and it's easy to lie to them at the time, whether it's about who their parents are or whether their parents have substance issues or mental health issues, but they know their parents so well, and they find this stuff out. And I didn't want that to be my children's case, that they would find out the wrong way, or there was deceit or trust had been broken. I wanted to be honest with them. And I wanted to do it differently. I really did.
Also, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were cut from the same cloth. They just didn't talk. They didn't really talk to each other. They didn't really talk at all. Like, they were very stoic. And they were very I know they loved very deeply. It was just expression wasn't a thing for them. And it was normal to brush aside, move forward. So again, now you have a myriad of professional accolades and everything. I want to know specifically what the innovation is like, and please dumb it down for me. Like, I want to know, what is it that you have, like, innovation implies something that's novel, right? And so I'm dying to find out. Like, what is it?
I think it's a few things. I think it's, first of all, it's client centered and family centered, depending on who you're working with. But I think it's always like, it's not a top down approach. It's an engagement, a process where it's a compassionate approach. It's persistent, but we're always working with, I always believe that all behavior has purpose. So if you look at my behavior as a young girl, it had purpose. I was in pain. I needed to get out of pain. Why did I need to get out of pain? Well, there were some severe things that were going on that were neglected. Okay. So all behavior has purpose. So rather than shaming that person, it's a very compassionate approach. And I think that the way that what we do that's unique is that we work with subconscious emotional root drivers as opposed to change in behavior by willpower, because willpower is a muscle that's going to wear off. We all know people want to lose weight, want to go to the gym, don't want to eat that chocolate cake. And then on a good day, all these things are really easy to do. But if you put enough stresses in place, or there's a weakness or there's a fatigue there, they fall apart at the wrong time. So how do you keep that person in the game when they really need to double down the most, right? And that's what we do. So we work with a combination of neuroscience, attachment theory, epigenetics, holistic, bringing in mind, body, spirit, but not just in the most simplistic way, in a really holistic, deep way, with reprogramming, neural rewiring in the brain and thinking. We look at all the beliefs, the mindsets, everything, because the paradigms are going to keep going. And we talked about that as we began. It could have been anything, right? You see people today, and I think we haven't even seen the beginning of it because of technology, as you know, right? Like, I think that's going to bring everybody to their knees, right? If it doesn't already, right?
Right. I have been fascinated lately with belief. I beat that drum really strong in my early recovery, and meaning, like, I needed to believe that it was possible. And even to this day, some of the beliefs that I have started with in recovery have been ripped off, right, in time. And so
Amazing.
I'm still working toward removing some of the beliefs that are inaccurate, some of the beliefs that were and are holding me back. I'm still doing that work, but I remain focused on my belief and increasing the belief that I'm capable of more. And so this is something I don't necessarily in that sense of that word, but I try to live it, right? I try to live without having those limiting beliefs. But I think this is one of the biggest, and it's also kind of a hot topic too, right? Like limiting beliefs. You hear a lot of that now. But I also truly believe that we are ingrained with a lot of them. It's so very hard to get rid of them on all levels, right? And so, I think that you addressing the fact that belief is so, it's imperative for somebody if they want to find success.
It is, but I
Yeah.
also believe that we're not short on information, we're short on implementation. So how do we actualize our knowledge? Like, how do we operationalize our knowledge, right? And it has to be done in a trauma-informed way, because, a lot of, and this is not, it's just the psychotherapists, they know how to provide safety and see someone and witness someone, which is an important part of essentially healing. It's a trauma-informed approach, which is also what we do. But you have to be able to actualize that person. And so that's an important thing, because we all know what we should do. None of us, but that's part of it. And I think I believe that everything about us, and we're talking about addiction, mental health, and trauma in particular, I believe that all has spectrum. We're all human, we're all messy, and we really don't get a manual on how to do this. And I think, I think my willingness was proportionate to my desperation. That's the only reason why I tried so hard. I think had it been easier for me, I would have done easy. Why not? I would have been we're wired for comfort. It's just, it wasn't easy for me. So I was willing to do anything. I was pretty desperate in terms of finding inner peace. It's not that my life was in a rage. Like, God, no, it looked like it was charmed really from the outside.
Do you feel that that element of you could not forego or you could not tolerate a life without your children, and that was what really made it do or die for you? Do you think that that part is necessary for people to really draw a line in the sand? Does it have to be something like that from
Yeah.
themselves? Because
It
I'll
has to
tell
be
you,
something that's important to you. It was a value. So I think when you're looking at behavioral change in general, it has to be a value-based change. So when I say that, so children were an absolute non-negotiable, but let's say I want to be clean and sober. If I'm focusing on a willpower approach to clean and sober, that's going to be hard on a hard day. On a good day, it's going to be super easy, and that's fine. But we all know that those hard days are coming, good and bad, right? Just ebb
sure,
and flow, ebb and flow. So if I have a value that health is important to me, and that isn't a value of mine, it's easy not to drink. It's easy not to eat the wrong thing because I'm looking at the long-term game. I'm looking at the long game, not the immediate gratification of this moment.
sure,
So that's what
sure.
people in the game. And it's the small, consistent, tiny habits, the micro habits are more important than the big ones. And people don't realize how many levers they have they can pull, right? In terms of how they can change their behavior, not give into their thinking. Their thinking is fiction. If they know that every thought that you think is not true, for the most part, especially when it comes to your limiting or negative beliefs, you wouldn't even listen to yourself. Like, I know not to listen to myself when I'm exhausted. I just do not take myself seriously. I put it in a parking lot and go, okay, we're going to revisit this later. Because if I make a decision in that state, it's going to be very different than if I make a decision with a clear head.
Just had that conversation with me before we hopped on tonight. I kid you not. I was driving. I was like, I'm a little tired.
Me
And I
too.
said,
Exhausted.
I need to not give any of my thoughts. And I probably shouldn't be saying that before we hit record, right? But that really was a conversation. I said, I'm a little bit fatigued. So I have to know that maybe my perception might be influenced by my fatigue and not the reality of what's really going on. And so I really believe
That's
that's
God. And you've also named it as well because you actually acknowledged it as opposed to just like pretending it doesn't exist.
sure. I mean, I literally walked myself through that conversation. I said, I'm a little bit tired and I feel a little bit negative. And I'm like, it's because I'm a little bit tired. And I thought to myself, I'm going to go to bed early tonight. It's exactly what I said. And I just think that that's so powerful what you had mentioned about it being value based. And anybody that's gotten some success in recovery knows that white knuckling it is it's just not a long-term play. It's a very tough gamble. Like, I'm just going to hold on so tight that this is going to happen. It is a very, very risky. And because to your point, the tough days are going to come. And often our grip is not strong enough to get through some of the worst days. It might even get you through some mediocre days, but that one really hard day is going to come. And so your own grip is not sufficient. How do you feel about the spiritual element? You've mentioned it a couple of times. Do you feel that like faith plays into this at all, or is that a part of your approach?
Strong, whatever lever you can access. I don't think it's all one thing or another. I think it's like a concoction of many things. I'm very spiritual. I'm very spiritual. It was something I clung to early in my recovery because I was in just such grave pain. So for me, that was a solution. I didn't have to be in control. I could let up a little and just surrender in the sense that there's an organizational principle about the universe that I may not understand. And that's all I needed to know. Whether it was religious or not, for people who can't get there, that's totally fine. But I recognize that there's an order in the universe, and I needed to know that I don't need to know everything. And I put trust. So even where I am right now, I'm in a transition in my career, my pivot and everything in terms of what I'm doing. And do I have a final destination? Not really. Am I moving forward regardless? Yeah, because something is telling me I need to do certain things and they won't go away. So it's now easier for me to do them than just to ignore them. So that's what I'm rolling. Does it happen? Does it need to happen? I have no idea what it's going to do, but I'll go with it. until it
Right.
doesn't suit me anymore, right? Or maybe it will.
Wow. I appreciate that call to adventure for sure. I mean, that's what I feel that too many times is overlooked. That usually that nudge that we get, it's like sometimes we just kind of blow past it, or we don't pay enough attention to it. And so that's super exciting that you are wholeheartedly moving toward it, right? That voice telling you what, not even promising. That's a part of it, right? Like, and hence the word faith is
Yes,
like,
it's not transactional. Like if people want, oh, well, if I do this and it's got to be look this way. I think I've been through that enough. I think that's what one of the beautiful things about getting older is you really get smarter, and you kind of don't care as much about a lot of things. You think you do. Like there's always going to be work to be done, and you're never there yet. I get that, but it seems like it's almost like a second rebellious teenager, but in a very different, healthier way. You know what I mean? It's like an addict.
sure.
What can I
Well,
say?
I think that's, I mean, clearly you're a lifetime learner, right? Like you lit up when you started going through those phases of you diving into these different topics and, modalities of treatment and everything. You like lit up like a Christmas tree. So it's very, you clearly dive in excited, right? And so I think that's also
Because I don't think enough people are subscribing to what really could be possible, because a lot of entrenched ways, and this is not just in mental health care or addiction, it's in politics, it's in healthcare, it's in education and criminal justice, it's in every domain in life. The old ways are dominated, and there's this reluctance to try something different. And things do innovate and improve over time. And sometimes evidence-based outcomes do take time to become more mainstream, which is happening. But I think, I'll use 12 step as an example. There's still a strong dominance to use it that way. And that's really because it's paid by insurance companies. It's not because it's an evidence-based protocol. That I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's not because it's based on any science. It's based because it had a presence at a time when it was a solution, and it still can be a solution for people, but it's not a total solution, and it doesn't help enough people. And that's not whether I am for AA or not for AA. It's just an example of some sort of, and it's not even AA is not a treatment. It's just really support. It's community, right? And so it's not a debate whether something's good or not. It's just that something can be dominated, and it takes presence, and it takes roots, and it gets very hard to include something else that could be beneficial. That's all I'm saying.
there is a certain amount of, well, people in AA are just territorial. I see it a
I,
lot, right?
yeah, generally speaking, there is that. And that's part of it.
I do think that the usefulness of AA is that it is 12 steps. It's very straightforward. And I think that sometimes people can take advantage of the simplicity. And sometimes a certain type of individual can actually do better just getting told, and here are the rules. And then all they have to do is like, I'll just follow these rules. But for yourself and myself included, it wasn't sufficient. It wasn't sufficient for your circumstances, and it really wasn't my path either. And so, what I firmly believe, that whatever works for somebody, and we're all so unique, and we all have our own circumstances. And I don't believe that anybody's circumstances is worse than another person's. However, it is that person's responsibility to figure out that unique solution for their unique circumstances. So a person like yourself, I mean, good on you for being able to adapt, right? And have that cognitive ability to grasp so many different approaches and then come up with your own. And so I think it's just outstanding. It's really outstanding, the kind of work that you're doing, the kind of results you've gotten in your own family, for example.
Patience. Don't give up that quickly.
And so, well, I mean, what are you working on? You said you had a pivot point in your career. What is on the horizon? What's coming in the future? What can we look forward?
You can look forward to workshops and trainings. And my wildest dreams is to have everybody become certified trained recovery concierges all over the world, where people really, wherever they enter, They know what to do if someone comes into their pathway, and in an expert clinical trained way know how to navigate properly and appropriately, because there is a process. It shouldn't be done by Google ads. It shouldn't be done by sales reps. And then offer them the tools on, the methodologies on how to do this well. Whether they're coaches, they need to be in coaching, and behavioral health is a very small linear space now. They overlap. And I think coaches need to know about trauma and mental health and how to navigate away and therapeutically align with other therapists if they're out of scope of practice. And so really it's about training people to give them resources and tools so that they do a great job. And there's a proprietary methodology. It'll probably be broken up into two aspects, but it's really about helping the next generation of leaders lead better. And that's what I want. I can't help people one person at a time. It's like, I've done that for the last 15 years, and I'm tired in that respect. And I think there's we need to raise our standards collectively. Like mental health, addiction in particular have really poor outcomes compared to physical health. And yet we tolerate that for some reason. I don't even know why. So this is a global issue, and I think we need a clear process and roadmap for those who come to us who need help, or we need to intervene with help. We need to do it in a better, kinder, gentler way, and in a non-stigmatizing way that we actually support people where they're at and welcome all of their humanity. And we don't do that.
Do you think that the lack of performance in mental health is a result of it not being a priority, or do you feel it's an issue of ignorance, like people just don't understand it?
It's nuanced because it's nuanced. Like we know what to do with broken bones, but we don't know what to do with broken hearts, right? It's very complex and it's nuanced, and you have to have the person who's the helper needs to be able to really see the big picture, not just narrow in on what's in front of them. Because even when I'm working with individuals, if we don't know how to engage the family, or we don't know how to empower the individual to stand on their own 2 feet, even in amidst the messy circumstances all around them, they're going to fall right back to where they started. So we need to engage all of their life, not just one part of their life. And I just think it's met because it's really complex, and we keep thinking that it's a top-down approach and that we're going to tell them what to do. Like, the addict needs to know their own best thinking got them here. Well, no, they're a person, they're hurting. And we need to really take the stigma out of the system. I think that's the first step, and start to recognize that we're all complex humans. And I believe there's spectrum on all of this. It's not
Right.
just
Yeah.
this is the protocol and this is the way we're going to do it. There's spectrum. And so as long as we're engaging with people, we can be helping them. And there's a new frontier. There's a new emergence. There's medication assisted therapy. There's psychedelics. There's recovery. There's flourish. And we want people to become anti-fragile. We want them to flourish. And so how do we get them from, fragile to anti-fragile? It's a long roadway in between, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That transformation is it's a tough one because anti-fragile, from my understanding, is not only are you able to withstand and endure, but you actually become stronger through your hardship and through the enduring, right? And then once you get to the other side, you're actually better than you were as a result of those circumstances, which is it's a tall order. It's a tough one for a lot of people. And it's always very hard, especially for somebody that's in the trenches, right? It's like, hey, you're going to be so much better once you get to the other side of this. And then they're like, I don't care what you're saying right now. Like they might be in that white knuckling portion of their journey, and they don't want to hear or understand or try to even like comprehend, like, oh, I'm going to be better at the end of this. It's sometimes it can be hard. It could be a tough message to deliver, but I agree with you wholeheartedly that that's the ideal outcome, is an anti-fragile person as a result of their circumstances, whatever they may be. But yeah, that's what a noble pursuit. And I think that is, like I said, it's a tall order, but good on you for leading that charge. So how is it that somebody can join you in this type of an effort, or where do we find out more? What does that look like? Where are your resources?
So my resources are on my website. So if you go to info at the Recovery Concierge, there's a resource page and you can just sign up and opt into wait lists on different things. We will have a new scorecard coming out very soon. If not, depending on when this is launched, and that will be able to show where the gaps are for an individual, as well as their
Okay.
helper, as well as their archetype in terms of their helping style. So that's what we're working on right now. And yeah, there will be workshops and all different teachings.
Right. And I'm going to have that in print for everybody to check out.
Thank you.
But I think that's exciting. I want to take a scorecard to see where I land. I'm not
Good.
afraid of it. Not afraid of it. Well, Jeanne, if I said I'm Jeanne, right? I'm
You
not
said it perfect. Thank you, Ryan.
trying to do it well, trying to be better every day. But you've been an absolute blessing. And then of course, you out there doing a job that is, it is not a very common pursuit to do what you're doing. And so I'm very thankful that you're doing it. And so I appreciate your time. And everybody, this has been another episode of The Next Fix.
Thank you very much, Ryan.